Okay, I'm gonna run quickly through, we got about 5 minutes here. So, some rules I'm giving, one is, if you got stock, don't give cash. I think every year you should look at your stock portfolio, and if you've got the ability to give cash and give stock, give the stock, use the cash to rebuy stock you might want that's better than what you had to get rid of. So it's a way to roll over your stock portfolio every year and keep making it better. I won't go through the example. Rule 2 is if you're over 70 and a half, like I'm going to be this year, I can now start taking money out of my IRA with a direct transfer to the church. And I don't have to report that as income. I don't get an additional tax deduction. But there's a huge advantage for people at the low end of the scale. You know, if you don't itemize your deductions, you take money out of an IRA, you got to report it for income tax purposes, but you get no benefit. If on the other hand, you're at the high end of the scale and you take money out and give it to charity, you lose part of your deductions because your income is too high. So this is a way, and for people in the middle, it can be a way of reducing their IRA account. That means the minimum required distribution in future years is less, which means you're going to pay less tax down the road taking money out. So I think that's rule 2. Rule 3 is the match of your income with your expenses. And this is where I think everybody should have a donor advised fund. And that is, especially people who have potential larger received income, as maybe it's a stock option, maybe it's a sale of real estate, sale of stock, bonus, you know, any of these strategies where you all of a sudden get an extra amount of income. Most of us maybe are not that day, not necessarily want to donate to a particular, but we would like to reduce the tax and have the flexibility to donate at some later date. So a donor advised fund is a fund set up by you with a charitable organization as the trustee or custodian, and you are the advisor. You tell them where to send grants. Like we've got a donor advised fund, so we send money from there to public television, to radio. So we were able to negate the income from one of our stock options by rolling some of our stock into the donor advised funds with zero tax, but now we get to do the gifting the rest of our lives. So if you have an interest or a desire, we can discuss that further, but I think it's a great tool to match incomes and deductions. Gift annuities. I don't like commercial annuities, but I love gift annuities. I think they're fantastic for people over 75 or 80 years of age in a church or somebody who's very motivated to support a charitable organization. Because in today's interest rate market, we got hundreds of senior citizens sitting with money in the bank earning less than 1% who would love to help one of their charities, their church, whatever, long-term at their death. And they can then put it into a gift annuity, get 7-8% payout for the rest of their life, and then at their death, what's left goes to the charity. Now, we found at the university, there are a lot of people that have CDs and a mentality of living off the income. They don't care less what's going to happen to that CD at their death. That's not an issue, that's not a concern to them. They're interested in the income for their life. So replacing that CD with an annuity, giving them instead of a 1% payout, giving an 8% payout, and if there was 50% left at their death to their church, that's a win-win. You know, we're not concerned about how much was left and where it was going to go. There may be some people that want to pass on to heirs, but you know, people that are really gift annuity oriented want to support their charity in a little larger amount, but would like a much higher income during their lifetime. And rule 4, at death, you give your good assets to your friends and your family, stock, real estate, life insurance, and Roth, and you give your bad assets to charity. And what I mean by bad assets is all those assets that have a deferred income that ordinary income tax would normally be paid on. So that means retirement plans, annuities, regular annuities, IRAs, so that the tax is avoided completely. The charities get 100% of whatever's in that account, whether it's an annuity contract, an IRA, or retirement plan. So that is a strategy I think works for your. And then, let me see here. And you know, and I really believe this, that the benefits of sharing, that elderly people who their whole lifetime have helped others, even if they're single, have no children, no family, will be surrounded by people to help them when they need help. And I've seen it all the time. People who don't help anybody, and maybe don't have family, or don't have family that lives in this area, you see they're very, very lonely people out there. So there's a self-interest in helping others because at some point we'll all be there. And it'd be nice to have somebody around. So, anyway, I'm going to terminate it at that. There's a few more pages you can read through at your leisure. If you have questions, call me at any time. I'll be glad to talk. That's one thing I'm good at. But consider the source. Decide whether the information is worth it, and then evaluate it. And then go forward.
Bob, I do have a question. I have a little confusion around 401K. I felt like in the presentation, I got confused by, on one hand, calling it a bad asset, or it sounded like, or 401K equal retirement.
Well, for distribution purposes at death, and only from the perspective that all retirement plans, which we don't have any choice over, is taxed at the ordinary tax rate. So what I am saying is that you want to maximize 401K and retirement plans. Absolutely, because that gives you a tax deduction now. And as I said before, any taxes you don't pay or taxes you pay now are never recovered. So you really want to minimize taxes while you're making money. Now, when it gets to the point where you're starting to use it, then you need to look at the other options. You know, is that to keep it there and have to pay ordinary income taxes that comes out, or is it to take it if there's a stock option to make sure that you convert that stock and keep it as a capital gains asset, or is it starting to roll it into a Roth? And there's Roth 401Ks now, so that you can, in fact, continue to let it grow as a tax-free option,
So the
that it
key,
passes income free.
the key is at age, whatever age, perhaps 70.5, when you have to start taking money out of your 401K, it's important to take some out and move it, or do you take the whole big chunk and move it over into something different?
Most people, moving the whole chunk doesn't work, because unless you're gonna match it with a donor advised fund gift of some sort, so that you're able to, you know, let's say if you were gonna give $10,000 a year for 10 years to charitable organizations, and you got $100,000 you want to roll from an IRA or 401K into a Roth. So you roll that, you take 100,000 of other assets and put it into the donor advised fund. So from that point on, you don't have to take your own money to make gifts each year. You just take money out of the donor advised fund. So you reduce your expenses each year because you no longer have to make the charitable gift from your own assets. And you've got tax-free on the Roth growing, so that what the end result should be you wind up giving as much or more to charity over the 10-year time period. At the same time, you're now taking a taxable event and creating it into a non-taxable event. And so now you've got tax-free growth the rest of your lifetime. So it's a matter of, if people don't have enough money to put in a donor advised fund, then it's a matter of chipping away out of that retirement plan and moving it to a Roth a little at a time, but the ultimate goal of being completely into a Roth before you die, so that your heirs, or whoever you want to receive it, get it tax-free. If you have nobody that you want to receive it, then you have to decide whether, you know, if charities are your beneficiary of choice for assets like retirement plans, annuities, and IRAs, then leaving it in its present status and just taking the minimum distribution and paying tax on it as it comes, maybe the right strategy.
But you can pass your IRA to your spouse, who is a long ways away from 70, and they don't
Yeah,
have to
you
pay
can-
tax
yeah.
until they're 70.
Yeah, you can postpone distributions to, and the same way with retirement plans and others, if you've got a person that's important to you that you want to receive that, they can, you know, stage out the distribution. But you still might want to do the evaluation. Would you rather have them get taxable long-term benefit, or would you like to have them have tax-free benefit? You know, so,
Depends how old you are, I guess.
you know, this is where we now get into the mathematical part, which we normally don't do that in investments. You know, you just kind of mostly make your decision. Not really, somewhat tongue in cheek here, but anyway, there is some math that can be used to at least put down the costs of the alternatives, you know, and then you can say, oh, this makes sense, or this doesn't, you know, and you do that. So, yeah, don't get me wrong, and when I say bad assets, I'm not saying that it's an asset you shouldn't put money into. I'm saying it's an asset you need to be aware of as being treated poorly by the government, so that maybe at some point I'm gonna wanna get money out of that account and into some other option. So, and fortunately, the government gives us some choices. Well, thank you all for coming. I hope you got one or two days. If you didn't pay any money, you could see me later.